Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théères, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Let's just go through the numbers really quickly. We know that 2,500 children were separated. There were more than 2,500 separated. It was nearly 3,000. Only 450 reunited. 1,600 plus are eligible, according to the government, for reunification. 905 parents we're being told, are not expected to be eligible for some reason, and 863 have final deportation orders. When you went down to the border, were you able to get any answers as to why they're declaring some parents ineligible?
No, I mean, our trip to the border was really to see exactly what's happening. But we did have a briefing, a closed-door briefing the other day, and we did not get answers from CBP, from ICE, and from Homeland Security other than, HHS, other than to say that they are deciding whether or not these children get to go back to their parents, which is really outrageous because these kids were ripped from their parents' arms. The court has ordered that they be reunited. The Trump administration already missed the first deadline, which was for children under 5. And now it looks likely that they are not going to be able to reunite all of these families. And so part of the argument they seem to be making is, well, there are a whole bunch of families, parents who don't deserve to have their parents back, their children back for one reason or another. And I can tell you, Joy, that it was absolutely heartbreaking. I will tell you that families are still being separated. I went with a group of 8 members of Congress, and we went to the Ursula Processing Center, which is really the epicenter of where these kids are being separated from their parents. That is still happening. In the processing center, which is something like 16,000 square feet, a huge facility, this is where the kids are in cages. They are still in cages, first of all. Important that the American people know that. And then secondly, if the children are over 10, they are placed in cages on the opposite end of the facility, separated from their parents. Their parents only have 1 hour a day that they're allowed to see their children. And we were told actually that that hour is something like 6 in the morning. So if you're not a parent, then the court order does not apply to you. So we sat on the floor with a sobbing grandmother who had come here with her grandson, 7-year-old grandson, had not seen that child for 4 days, was taken away from her, does not know where that child is, and she raised him. She has effectively been his parent. We saw siblings. If you're over 18 years old and then you come with a 12-year-old, you are separated as well. So this tragedy, this crisis that has been brought on by the Trump administration's cruel and inhumane zero tolerance, zero humanity policy is still going on, even as the court is ordering families to be reunited. It was horrific, and it's hard to find the words, Joy. We met with one set of parents who had just been reunited with their children. They were in a shelter that's run by the Catholic Charities, and the sister allowed us to go in and speak with them. And this brings tears to my eyes even as I think about it. The child told us, 7-year-old boy, told us that he was told by government agents that his mother had abandoned him. And That is why she was not there. And as they spoke to us, mother and child were weeping, and so were the rest of us. Can you imagine the child abuse, government-sanctioned violence that we are doing to these children and to these parents by telling them things like that?
And that is the word that was used. A lot of child psychologists have actually said that this is child abuse. Kirstjen Nielsen, the Homeland Security Secretary, has denied that. So just to reiterate, you're saying that the Trump administration is still separating children from their parents and still caging migrant children.
Absolutely.
It is Monday, the 23rd of July of 2018, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is River City Hash Mondays, because what a weekend, huh? Wow, wasn't that tiresome? I thought weekends were supposed to be the time we rest, and now we just get deluged with even more propaganda, spin, actual news, threats. Wow. Talk about an all-cap threat on a late night. I have a feeling something's going to will be made public about the Mueller investigation again. He doesn't do this for stuff that's like out there right now. Oh no, this isn't in reaction to what the media already has. This is in reaction to something he just found out that Mueller's going to do. What I want to know is, how is he figuring out what Mueller's going to do? What rogue New York FBI office is tipping him off? Well, talking to Rudy, and then the rest of the Trump White House knows. Hey, what happened to North Korea? I don't know. I mean, why not threaten them with nukes, Donnie Two Scoops? Because I got to tell you, threaten Iran? I mean, I don't know. That's like throwing a rubber ball against a wall. I don't take the threats from Iran that seriously. And I really don't think they take the threats from us that seriously either, to be honest with you. The Iranian people know, yeah, this is like 1984. It's like Wag the Dog. It's like any of the obvious, cinematic metaphors, or even metaphors from literature, which some people will want to know which came first, the movie or the book. We know which came first. Oh boy. So busy. What a busy weekend. Oh, we still have fires. 170 fires nearby. And so let's hope they don't all link up. That one big fire would be even worse than the 170 small fires. The smallest fire is about 8,000 acres. How do you like them apples? Ouch. So if my voice sounds a little harsh or whatever, it's because it is. It's scratchy. And I've been having sneezing fits because there's something like madrone. I think it's madrone that's burning. It's a really stinky wood. And whenever people burn madrone, I tend to, react to it because it's stinky. And sneezing fits will ensue. So I hope that I don't have to, I'm hoping actually that I can mute the mic if I happen to let loose with a rapid exhalation. What else is on the menu? Well, who was that up top? Well, that was Representative Pramila Jayapal. Or Jayapal. I'm sorry. Jayapal. And she's been a very strong voice on what ICE is doing. I'm not, when people say you can't abolish ICE is a terrible political move. Well, they want to get rid of the State Department. Jesus, no one's whining about that. Well, yeah, we are. But, I got to say, if deconstructing the administrative state is the goal, then I think that ICE is a redundant group. They already have a bunch of brown shirt shock troops in that quarter of our government. Okay? I'm sure we can repurpose all these people into being, Gestapo guards. Don't have to have a separate special one. It's a waste of money, waste of time, waste of effort. Really? Really? So, abolish ICE? I don't know. What I was actually thinking, ICE could be a really cool, no pun intended, organization if we repurpose them into a kind of Peace Corps. Why don't we do that? Why don't we make ICE into a welcoming committee? The welcome wagon. Hi. Welcome to the neighborhood. We know the first few nights, the first week is really tough. So we helped you out. We got you, some groceries, dinner for tonight, as a matter of fact. We know the kids are hungry. Brought a pie. Fresh linens even. People would bring fresh linens in the welcome wagon construct. Oh, you don't know what that is? You have to be of a certain age. Yes. And maybe we could task them with that. Wouldn't that be nice? We don't have to abolish them, repurpose them. And Representative Jayapal, though, describes the facilities as they are extant. And what are they? Well, they're child abuse centers sanctioned by the federal government. Mm-hmm. And we better call it what it is. And who are we as a people that would continue to allow this to go on? I know we're being deluged with, a nuke war with Iran, a nuke war with North Korea. If we say anything bad about Vlad, we have a nuke war there. But while that's going on, 5,000 kids have still not been reunited with their parents, and they probably never will. And somebody, or let me put it this way, a lot of people are going to be held to account for that. And the ghouls who are working the front lines, normally I don't like to get mad at the person at the window, right? The clerk, the person who's answering the phone, it's useless to get mad at them. They're worker bees. Except when you get into, the prison construct. Or, where you get petty bureaucrats who have felt powerless all their lives, and now they get a little bit of power, and the next thing you know, it corrupts them absolutely. So the ghouls who have been tormenting psychologically, physically, what have you, they will be held to account too, and they better be going to jail. But you know how it usually goes. Those are the ones they go after, and they don't go after the people who actually, made the policy. They don't go after the people who were installed by an aggressive foreign power intent on destroying our way of life. Seems like they've been damn successful. Damn right. Okay, what's up on the rest of the menu? So what's on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? River City Hash Mondays. Well, a neighbor calls the cops on a black businessman opening a new lemonade and beverage store in San Francisco. Right there in the Mission. A neighbor called him up. You don't belong here. In the Mission. Give me a break. A Russian soccer club canceled the contract of a black teenaged phenom after protests by Russian racist fans. Or would that be racist Russian fans? Yeah, racist Russian fans. Right after the World Cup, too, they promised. They promised they wouldn't be racist anymore. Oh, and white supremacists' disturbing outreach to Russian friends shows why Trump's fondness for Putin is even darker than it seems. After the break, we then move to the chef's table, where Russian spy and honeypot Maria Butina, or is that Butina, took meetings with top US Treasury officials. Was she just signing him up for some, shooting classes? I wonder. No, she was only talking about adoptions. Maybe just adoptions. And a congressional statute that is several years old may just prevent a Trump-Putin agreement on military cooperation. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the rightish of the page there is the chat room link, monitored by Kelly Lincoln. So that's a great way to engage with us, often in real time. Now, of course, she has to pay bills, but she gets back to you if she's not there. And more than likely, there's people already in the chat room that you can engage with as well. So do that. And while we're on the subject of Kelly Lincoln, and Netroots Nation 18 in New Orleans, Kelly will be there on Radio Row. So if you happen to be there, look for her. And we would like to ask if you can help buy dinner, lunch, and maybe breakfast. Can you help do that? Well, that would be great, because Kelly, she needs to get fed while she's there. Got everything else kind of covered. Thank you. But we need her to be well fed and hydrated so that she can do the good work for Resistance Radio. And any generosity you can extend to her is greatly appreciated. You can find a link to her funding platform or platforms on the show notes and links diary that I post on Daily Co's, and you can find me there as Justice Putnam. But before I get into me, you can follow Netroots Radio on Twitter at Netroots Radio, and Tom takes care of that. Thank you, Tom. And Kelly and I and Kelly helps too. Facebook does what they want to do, is what I'm trying to say. So we're on Facebook. You can find the show or the station there. You can follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. And you can follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West. Who knows? But we are on Facebook as West Coast Cookbook. And I don't know if I have the Speakeasy up there, but go West Coast Cookbook. You'll find it. And you can also get podcasts of the show on iTunes, Stitcher, Spreaker, TuneIn, and wherever fine and even not so fine podcasts can be found. We're in there with all of them. How democratic. Okay, this first article is out of Raw Story by Bob Brigham. A black businessman in San Francisco explained the hardships of trying to open a business in a gentrified neighborhood. Yep. Victor Stevenson is the proprietor of Gourmanade, or is that Gourmanade? A permanent lemonade stand that recently opened on Valencia Street in San Francisco's Mission District. Used to be one of the most diversified neighborhoods in San Francisco. Yep. Well, I don't know. Maybe there's a lot of kids from the peninsula moved up, and they got some cheap digs, in some places there. Kicked out a few people, and now they don't know who is in the neighborhood. That's usually what happens with gentrification. Actually, they know who's in the neighborhood, and the people that used to be in the neighborhood, they really don't want them there anymore. Well, Stevenson said that even before his opening, people had spray painted racist graffiti on his storefront, tagging his business as Monkey Juice. Things got worse after the opening, with 4 cops showing up only 3 days after his grand opening. I'm standing here at my store trying to make sure my security system is up and running properly, and the next thing I know, 4 cops hop out of their cars on me. And come to find out, somebody in the neighborhood called and said that I was breaking into my own business. I didn't see the other 2 officers behind me, but the one in front of me had his hand on his gun, he recalled. Well, I have to admit, I've talked to cops, and they put their hand on their gun. They always do. Now, the San Francisco Mission Station, the police department's mission station, is less than 3 blocks away down the same street. Well, I always heard that the best place, if you're going to rob someplace, rob it around the police station. Because all the cops are gone. No one's guarding that area. Okay. He said his wife had nightmares that night. I don't think my family or any other family should have to go through this for no reason. And he said people die because of this misuse of police resources and racial profiling every day, he reminded. I'm just blessed to be alive to tell my story and hopefully can help spark some major changes in how these situations are handled. It's a criminal act to make these, he's calling it a criminal act to make these calls. And they should be treated as such. I got to say, this is a form of swatting. And that's filing a false police report. And when people die, I think it should be negligent homicide. But that's just me. I'm a romantic. From Think Progress brings us this next offering here. And the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays. A teenage soccer player has had his contract canceled by Russian second division side Torpedo Moscow just 6 days after signing it because fans of the club did not want to have a black player on their team. Irving Potaka-Yoboma, a defender who was born in Russia but is of Congolese descent, signed for Torpedo last week, which prompted a torrent of protest and abuse from Torpedo fans on Russia media. I should say social media. Dear Torpedo leadership, since you consider it permissible to come to our house, to our family, and not respect our traditions and rules, then we reserve the same right. Well, that's from a group called Zapad 5 Ultras. And that's they wrote on VK, the Russian equivalent of Facebook. Let's see to whom this would be better. Another wrote that black may be one of our club's colors, but we only want whites in our ranks. Oh, well, that's very nice. Now, how many times have I heard these sorts of, the first charge, you don't respect our traditions. You don't respect our values. Okay. In response, the leadership of Torpedo canceled the teenager's contract, claiming that the offer was rescinded due to financial reasons, and that racism had nothing to do with the decision. They thought that maybe fans wouldn't come out and pay for tickets because of a lone black player on their team. It used to be, I take it back. We've seen this before in our own country, haven't we? As a player, I just like to play against great athletes. Everybody, if you're a good player, I want you on my team. Of course, on the other hand, I guess you could say the same thing about, the guy was a wife killer, but he really does handle the outside pitch really well when it's off the plate. He can really hit that far. Let's sign him up. Other Torpedo Ultras attempted to explain away their hostility to Potaka-Yoboma because the defender had previously spent time at rival Lokomotiv Moscow, despite the fact that Lokomotiv currently plays in a different division. And Torpedo Moscow has repeatedly faced sanctions over their fans' racist tactics. And antics, too. Let's see, Alexander Zotov, who has the All-Russian Union of Footballers, condemned the incident. There have been changes in attitude after the World Cup, but a group of idiots still remains. People with a limited worldview exist in our country. We saw how open our society and people were during the tournament. I have a feeling Mr. Zotov will have one of those convenient heart attacks, convenient fatal muggings in the foyer of his apartment building. One of those convenient polonium poisonings. Or the ever-convenient fall from a 5-story window moving a piano in your condo when you don't own a piano. Or a condo. guest offering here in the Bistro Cafe, Pardo, West Coast Cookbook, and Speakeasy comes by way of Cody Fenwick at Alternate. Many fear that Donald Trump's obvious affection for Russian President Vladimir Putin means that the occupant of the Oval Office is being blackmailed by a foreign power. And while there is some evidence to support this theory, another even more troubling explanation has received far less attention. This theory posits that Trump is not solely obliged to Putin for personal reasons, but that he also has an ideological affinity for the authoritarian leader. The ideological connection is illustrated in the increasingly amicable relationship between American white supremacists and the Russian state, as detailed in a recent Think Progress article. More recently, this connection manifested in a letter from Michael Hill, the president of the neo-Confederate group League of the South, addressed to, quote, our Russian friends, end quote, as reported by Right Wing Watch. In the letter, Hill announced the launch of a Russian language section on his group's website and draws out his shared interest with Russia. We understand that the Russian people and Southerners, I'm sorry, he's not really German, is he? We understand that the Russian people and Southerners are natural allies in blood, culture, and religion. As fellow whites of Northern European extraction, we come from the same general gene pool. As inheritors of the European cultural tradition, we share similar values, customs, and way of life, and as Christians, we worship the same Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. And our common faith binds us as brothers and sisters. Boy, there's a lot of psychological issues in that statement. I don't want to get into one right now, but we'll break it down some other time. Think Progress reports that Hill also held a video conference call with the anti-globalization movement of Russia's 2014 conference in Moscow. The invitation for Hill to speak marks one of the earliest instances of interest in Russia in stoking secessionist and white supremacist movements across the U.S., writes Casey Michelle for Think Progress. It would set the tone for things like opening of a California embassy in Moscow or the Heart of Texas Facebook page, which advocated Texas secession. Now, the apparent alliance between Russian nationalists and American white supremacists suggests a foreign policy agenda that Trump seems to be pursuing. It would involve closer ties to largely white authoritarian states like Russia, while distancing the U.S. from liberal multicultural democracies like Canada, the UK, and Germany. That Trump might be intentionally undermining the structure of global alliances and attempting to replace it with a much more sinister framework is an idea that hasn't been widely discussed. But it is urgent that we begin taking it seriously. Indeed. Okay, let's go ahead and take our break right now, and we'll come back and go through weather from around the world, and then we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. This week, Leaves More Than a Trace. Taking its name from the outdoor conservation movement, the new film from Winter's Bone director Deborah Granick, Leaves No Trace, is several kinds of movie. It's a father-daughter love story. It's a piece on homelessness, one about PTSD-affected veterans, and it's a coming-of-age story. As the movie opens, we meet Will and daughter, Ben Foster and New Zealand newcomer Thomasin McKenzie, in and around their camp in the woods near Portland, Oregon. It's soon clear that they're not campers or weekend survivalists. They live there. Later in the film, when a social worker tells Tom that Will was required to provide a home for her, she answers without hesitation, he did. The two come to town only for Will to pick up supplies, which they pay for with the proceeds from him selling meds he's gotten from the VA. Their biggest fear is discovery, for which they even hold drills. Despite that, though, they are eventually discovered, briefly separated, and then placed in a modest dwelling on a Christmas tree farm where Will works to pay the rent. While Tom's socialization proceeds, Will is tormented by it and eventually takes Tom and heads back out on the road to Washington State, where he's seriously injured but then nursed back to health by the inhabitants of a curious backwoods RV community. It's here, before the inevitable, if not totally conclusive conclusion, that Tom tells her dad, "The same thing that's wrong with you isn't wrong with me." Granick is telling an understated but powerful story here, with every sidebar and every frame, especially the long close-ups on Foster's and Mackenzie's faces, advancing the narrative or its ambience. Oscar will remember this one, avoid the post-nomination lines, and catch Leaves No Trace now. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. Catch up with us at take2moviereview.com and feed us back on our page on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Christopher Intagliata. The big hurricanes last summer, Harvey, Irma, and Maria, knocked out internet service for many residents. But another threat to the internet is just plain old sea level rise.
Oh, yeah. I mean, some is already happening.
Carol Barford, a biogeochemist at the University of Wisconsin-Madison.
There's a lot of data out there that shows that sea level on the coast is rising.
And that, she says, means big problems for internet connectivity in major coastal cities like New York, Seattle, and Miami. Barford and her colleagues forecast that danger using a map of global internet networks, along with sea level rise data from NOAA.
So there are two maps. Where's the internet stuff and where's the flooding? And they were superimposed, and where they coincide, there are problems.
Using NOAA's extreme sea level rise estimate, recommended for forecasts involving long-term infrastructure like this, the researchers say that 15 years from now, 4,100 miles of fiber optic cable could be underwater, and 1,100 internet hubs could be surrounded by water. And remember, our land-based infrastructure isn't waterproof like transoceanic cables are.
Seawater comes in, and cabling is not meant to work underwater. So signals will be interrupted and dropped. You know, the actual infrastructure itself might deteriorate.
The researchers presented the peer-reviewed findings at the Applied Networking Research Workshop in Montreal this week. They also write that large internet service providers, including AT&T, CenturyLink, and Intelliquent, face the greatest risk. So if these predictions play out, internet companies need to harden their networks soon, they say. Or we could lose service during the emergency, right when we need it most. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Christopher Intagliata.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Pools, water parks, and other recreational water venues are popular places to relax and stay cool, but they can be sources of serious illness. Since 2000, nearly 500 outbreaks have been reported at recreational water venues in the U.S., resulting in over 27,000 illnesses and 8 deaths. Most were caused by parasites, bacteria, viruses, or certain chemicals in the water. Parents with young children who have diarrhea should not allow their children to swim or play in the water. In addition, bathers should check the inspection scores of pools and water parks and can conduct mini-inspections using test strips before getting in the water. A few simple precautions can allow you to share the fun, not the germs. Thank you for joining us on A Minute of Health with CDC.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Welcome to 60 Second Civics, the daily podcast of the Center for Civic Education. I'm Mark Gage. George Mason gave an impassioned warning against slavery at the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia. Mason concluded with a stern warning. He said, "Every master of slaves is born a petty tyrant. They bring the judgment of heaven on a country. Providence punishes national sins by national calamities." 22 years earlier, in 1773, Mason had written a longer essay in which he condemned slavery in even stronger terms. That slow poison is daily contaminating the minds and morals of our people. Every gentleman here is born a petty tyrant. practice in acts of despotism and cruelty, we become callous to the dictates of humanity and all the finer feelings of the soul. Taught to regard a part of our own species in the most abject and contemptible degree below us, we lose that idea of dignity of man which the hand of nature has implanted in us for great and useful purposes. Mason's aversion to slavery and his vigorous condemnation of the institution remained a constant throughout his life. Even so, Mason never moved beyond condemning it in speeches and writing. Unlike George Washington, Mason never freed his slaves, nor did he make provisions to support them. That's all for today's podcast, 60 Second Civics, where civic education only takes a minute.
You can help stop the Trump agenda in its tracks. Make sure you're registered to vote. Go to rockthevote.org. And on November 6th, vote for Democrats up and down the ticket. This message, a public service from all the fine people of netrootsradio.com.
This is Solidarity News on Radio Labour.
This is a Radio Labour report recorded on Monday, July 23rd, 2018. I'm Mark Belanger.
My son was about 4 years old at the time, and we were in the backyard. And he had one of those little motorized Jeeps. And him and his buddy were riding around in the back, and I was on the phone talking to somebody about the union, and he heard me say that. And so he pulls up in the Jeep, and he said, "Dad, what's a union?"
That is Richard Trumka, the president of the AFL-CIO, the largest labor federation in the United States. He was interviewed on the podcast Crooked Conversations by Jason Kander.
And I said to him, there's a little hill there. I said, both of you get out of the Jeep. I said, Rich, push that Jeep up the hill. And he'd push it up a little bit, and he'd slide, and he'd slide backwards, and he'd push it up a little bit and slide backwards, and he finally gives up. And his buddy Chad was with him. I said, Chad, now you help him. And the two grunt a little bit, but they get the Jeep to the top of the hill. And I said, son, that's what a union is. It allows people to come together, to do things together that they can't do individually. That's a union. We are sort of an association of unions. We have 55 international unions. We have about 13 million members. We're organizing a lot. We organized 262,000 new members last year, which is a good thing. And 75% of those members were under the age of 35. Young people are starting to get it more and more and more. They're coming along and saying, look, this economy isn't working for us. So how do we change it? We change it by coming together with our fellow workers, getting the ability to bargain collectively so we can get a fair share of the wealth that we produce. And I just got to say this. Remember, we're the richest nation on the face of the earth at our most rich point in time. There is no reason why we can't have good wages, quality health care, and a decent pension for every single American out there.
So, why do you do this? Like, why does Richard Trumka do this? What drives you every day to do this?
When I was growing up in that little town that I told you about, Nemacolin, I got to see things pretty up close. There was a group of people that were fighting to provide a safer workplace, provide better wages, provide better benefits, so that my dad could have a vacation, I could go on vacation with him. And I saw a company that had virtually all the power because it owned the town. It owned everything in the town but two things, the Catholic Church and the Union Hall. That was the only two things it didn't own. And I looked around and said, we need to make massive social change. And I thought the only thing, after studying it, thinking about it, talking to people, the only group that has the ability to make social change on the scale that we need to make it is the labor movement. And I said, I want to fight for working people. And I was fortunate enough that the United Mine Workers sent me to college. I worked midnight shift in a mine, went to school in the daytime, and then they sent me to law school. I did the same thing, worked 6 months and started to fight. And I can tell you, when I started 50 years ago in the labor movement, I'm still fighting some of the same fights that I was fighting back then. Safe and a healthy place to work, fair wages, decent health care, decent pension, quality public education, so that every kid in the country can have an education. And I know in my heart that the labor movement and workers coming together to help workers is the best way to do it.
And that's it. International labor news you can use. I'm Mark Boulanger. Thank you for listening. And remember, it's all about global solidarity.
From UN headquarters in New York, I'm Luke Vargas with your World in 2 minutes. American tech companies took a beating in Europe this week. The EU slapped Google with a $5 billion fine for illegally limiting competition by forcing manufacturers to pre-install Google Search and the web browser Chrome on Android phones. The European Commission said Google can dominate markets like search, mobile operating systems, or the sale of mobile apps. What it can't do is force other companies to use its services. The timing of that decision could be a sign of Europe flexing its muscles as it digs in for what could be a long trade fight with the United States.
You could probably interpret this ruling as sort of a warning shot into the direction of Donald Trump, in the sense of saying that we can get into a trade war, but it's not that we don't have any weapons in our arsenal.
Paul Jasper Dittrich is a research fellow for Digital Europe at Berlin's Jacques Delors Institute.
The single market is sort of the largest consumer market in the world. And the Commission obviously does have the power to go after the largest American online platform companies if it wants to.
Facebook also learned this week Europe isn't like the regulatory Wild West of the United States, as the German government ordered the social media giant to remove Holocaust denial content in compliance with German law. CEO Mark Zuckerberg previously said such speech was deeply offensive, but it wasn't Facebook's job to remove it.
That's an issue with most American online platforms, that they try everything not to get under official government regulation and instead apply what they call self-regulation.
Given recent studies showing increasing anti-Semitic content online, perhaps it's no surprise the German government isn't okay letting Zuckerberg's belief that most Holocaust deniers aren't intentionally distorting the truth guide company policies.
From a German perspective, since denying the Holocaust is illegal in Germany, it would sort of be a no-brainer that denying the Holocaust should also be illegal online.
Luke Vargas, the United Nations.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy River City Hash Mondays. Let's get on with this weather. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 68 degrees. We are going to be a little warmer than yesterday, though it was pretty warm yesterday. We're going to go up to about 103 today. We were around 100 yesterday. The forecast is for mostly cloudy. Oh, I should mention that we are under an active heat advisory. We will be in triple digits, about 101 to 105 through the week. And so active heat advisory, but we are also ringed, as I mentioned earlier, by 170 grass and forest fires in my region. And the forecast is for mostly cloudy, but I think it's mostly smoke. And right now the wind is out of the west-southwest at a negligible 1 mile per hour. Should be increasing in a couple of hours to 5 to 10 miles per hour out of the northwest, then shifting tonight out of the north-northwest, maintaining its clip of 5 to 10 miles per hour. The air quality, I don't have any data, but I can assure you it is deadly. It is so bad. Grass pollen is moderate. The daytime UV is very high, but has come down a notch to 8, and that's probably because of how much smoke is in the air. So you trade off the melanoma for a spot on your lungs. How nice. Pressure is high at 30.01 inches. Visibility is down to 3 miles. It's very thick out there right now. Humidity currently is at 57%, but it should drop below 15% today, which is not good for fires. We don't like that. And yes, so that's very nice. All right. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted. These purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 88 degrees and sunny. Paris is 87 degrees and sunny, and they also have an active heat advisory for their area. Rome is 87 and partly cloudy. Kiev is 75 and fair. Kabul is 82 and partly cloudy. Hong Kong is 79 degrees with a light rain. Tokyo is 87 degrees and partly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 57 and partly cloudy. San Francisco is currently 57, and they are under a heat advisory, should be up in the upper 90s. Ouch. And New York is 74 degrees and cloudy. But it looks like you're going to clear up, because that's how it is in the Big Apple in the summertime. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted. These purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Starting off here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays. There's an article out of Think Progress by Kyla Mandel. Now, this Maria Butina was also bankrolled by a Russian billionaire. And when we think of Mnuchin setting up a policy in which the NRA cannot be compelled to divulge their donors list, like Russian donors, on the heels of this honeypot's arrest. Raises a lot of questions, you would think. Accused Russian spy Maria Butina had high-level meetings with US Treasury officials and received funding from a Russian billionaire invested in U.S. energy and technology. Fresh revelations shedding more light on her activities in the U.S. come after Butina, founder of what she considered the Russian equivalent of the NRA, was indicted Tuesday on conspiracy charges and for failing to register as a foreign agent. Butina has pleaded not guilty. I just didn't. You mean you have to register as a spy? No, as a foreign lobbyist. Okay. According to Reuters, Butina participated in meetings between her handler, Alexander Torshin, then deputy governor of the Russian Central Bank, and known to have close ties with Vladimir Putin, and two senior officials at the Federal Reserve and Treasury Department in 2015. As last week's indictment details, Butina is accused of working with Torshin for the purpose of developing and executing a plan to identify and exploit personal connections with U.S. persons, excuse my mouth, having influence in American politics who were in positions to advance the interests of the Russian Federation. The reports lend credence to this accusation. Butina had wider high-level contacts in Washington than previously known, writes Reuters. The news outlet says the meetings provide further insight into her efforts to cultivate relationships with American political leaders and special interest groups. Ooh, I wonder what that means. Butina traveled to the U.S. with Torsion in April of 2015, where the Washington, D.C. foreign policy think tank, Center for the National Interest, known for its pro-Russia stance, arranged meetings for the two Russians with then Federal Reserve Chairman Stanley Fischer and Treasury Undersecretary for International Affairs at the time, Nathan Sheets. But that's not all. As the Washington Post reported on yesterday, Butina has received financial support from Russian billionaire Konstantin Nikolaev, whose fortune has largely come from investments in port and railroads in Russia. Nikolaev, however, also sits on the board of the Houston-based company American Ethane. Last year in China, Donald Trump showcased the company. It was one of 15 to sign a massive trade deal between the U.S. and China. The billionaire is also an investor in the San Francisco startup called Grabber that helps users buy unusual products from around the world. I bet. A spokesperson for Nikolaev confirmed to the Washington Post that he was in contact with Butina between 2012 and 2014 while she was launching her pro-gun rights group in Russia. However, he declined to confirm whether Nikolaev provided any financial support. And the spokesperson also added, but Nikolaev has never met Trump. Probably winking, going, I'd like to, though. Nikolaev's son, though, however, volunteered for the 2016 campaign to elect Trump. Dad didn't have to. His son told him everything was going on. While it's unclear whether Nikolaev attended any official inaugural events, Butina made an appearance at one of Trump's inaugural balls. How much money was in that inaugural fund again? Was it all in dollars, or was it at least some in rubles?
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mais automne, quand les feuilles tombent partout, si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Ryan Goodman from Just Security brings us his last offering here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Whether verbal agreements Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin may have reached in their private meeting in Helsinki, a congressional limitation on cooperation with Russia may put a stop to some of those efforts. Several years ago, Congress specifically placed roadblocks in advance of any future military cooperation with Russia. By federal statute, consistently renewed on an annual basis, Congress prohibits bilateral military cooperation with Russia, with some buts added to that legal prohibition. Now, Goodman does offer a disclaimer here. He had worked on issues involving this statutory provision when he served as special counsel to the General Counsel of the Department of Defense. How exactly this legal prohibition by Congress works, Goodman continues here, and whether the administration has a constitutional basis for ignoring it has become ever more pressing following the readout of the Helsinki summit and remarks by the head of the U.S. Central Command, General Joseph Votel, who invoked the statutory prohibition explicitly on Thursday. During the 2-hour private meeting in Helsinki, Putin made specific and interesting proposals to Washington on how the two countries could could cooperate on Syria, and the two leaders entered into important verbal agreements. That's according to what Russia's ambassador to the U.S., Anatoly Antonov, told reporters. Meanwhile, officials at the most senior levels across the U.S. military scrambling since last Monday to determine what Trump may have agreed to on national security issues in Helsinki had little to no information. Wow. How does that work? Some of those Pentagon officials may feel a sense of security that the congressional statute forecloses certain options, but does it? In response to a well-crafted question by NPR's Tom Bowman, General Vodal told reporters on Thursday the National Defense Authorization Act, as a law, prohibits us from coordinating, synchronizing, or collaborating with Russian forces. There is a common misunderstanding of the statute made by commentators and perhaps by some policymakers in the current administration. It is commonly thought that the federal law categorically prohibits bilateral military-to-military cooperation between the governments of the U.S. and the Russian Federation. After all, that's what the statute says. But the statute also says that the Secretary of Defense, in coordination with the Secretary of State, can break out of this constraint if the Defense Secretary determines a waiver is in the national security interest of the United States. Such a decision by Defense Secretary Jim Mattis could not be kept secret. The statute requires him to notify congressional committees of any such waiver. In essence, Mattis is what one might call a veto player. He is formally assigned the authority to make that determination, not the president, the defense secretary. But that fact raises a potential constitutional problem with the statute. The White House may try to find wiggle room in the wording of the statute, or else pull out the big legal guns, a claim that congressional conditions are unconstitutional and thus do not need to be followed. Well, what's the wiggle room? The statute is written to prohibit only bilateral military cooperation. What if Trump says, oh, well, it's going to be multilateral? Okay, we'll have Russia and a bunch of Russian satellites that are under the thumb of Vlad. Okay, now it's not bilateral, it's multilateral, so it's all okay. Well, there are naturally constitutional arguments in the opposite direction, especially since the statute involves a decision by Congress. And the legal issues that arise are not specific to the statute. The same questions may have implications for other legislation that Congress considers in response to Trump's actions coming out of Helsinki. Yeah, well, it's making America great again, isn't it? We got to get out of here. We're at the end of our broadcast period for today, but we will be back tomorrow for Tarrytown Charter Tuesdays. That's what we do here. Oh, yeah. So stay tuned for that. And but also stay tuned to Netroots Radio for all the breaking news as it breaks. And it's breaking right now. Okay? So stay tuned for that. And we will visit with you tomorrow in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, boire un latte coeur. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin l'âge tendre, nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver, dans mon jardin d'hiver.